Today I'm going to be answering questions from the Q&A I put up yesterday on my Instagram. Didn't get a ton of questions, but I got a handful that I'll talk about now. I just finished this sampling. It's 6:18 at Lake Winds, Minnetonka. It's been a long day. And what I got to start off by saying is after a year of not having like a full-time or part-time job, I now remember what it's like to come home from a long day of work and still have to go out and run. And I am better prepared to understand people's experiences that work a full-time job, that have a family, that have kids. Now, I'm not saying that those are excuses for not going out and getting your run in or going out and getting your lift in, because even when I was working full-time at Busy, I was still doing the full year calendar club. I didn't leave until March, so I had about 8 months. March, April. I had 10 full months of doing calendar club while working full-time. So I'm not, completely... What I'll say is I understand. I empathize with it. It's hard. It is hard. Like, I'm going to drive home. I won't get home till 7. And if I'm lucky, because traffic looks really bad. And then I'm going to go and get my 8 miles for the day. So I understand it. And I feel better equipped to talk to people about how you can't make excuses. You gotta just show up regardless of how you feel, because now I'm in a position where I'm in the same or similar position to you who are sitting across from this camera and this screen, where you probably work full-time job. You're probably doing other extracurricular activities. Maybe you have a family. Maybe you have a wife and kids. Now, I can't totally empathize and put myself in your shoes in that situation or experience, but I can promise you this: when I do have a wife and kids, I'll still be out here working, taking care of them, and getting my workout run in, accomplishing the goals I set out to do. So there is a certain aspect that I want to stay connected to that. So that's today. But we're going to answer some Q&As probably along the drive home. The first question, I'm going to get this car started. All right, question number 1. How do you keep motivation through those long races? How do you keep motivation through those long, dreading races? Okay, the first thing, it's almost identical to how I'm going to go out and do this run right now, is I remove the part of myself that needs motivation, that needs happiness, desire, satisfaction, energy. In this moment, as I'm going home, and I have none of those things. I have no desire, I have no motivation. I'm exhausted. Been up since 5:30 this morning, and I still have a commitment that I made to myself to go out and run 8 miles. And by putting myself in this position of saying, okay, I've made this commitment, all of these excuses I'm building up to, like, in my head right now, it's not even a question of whether I'm not I'm going out for a run. I'm going out for a run. That's the decision that's already been made. Like, it's not a question of if, it's a question of how long is it going to take, and how long is it going to take for me to get out the door when I get home. So by practicing doing that in my training, by practicing the mindset and attitude of it's not an if but a when or a how am I gonna get out the door, it's not a matter of if, it is a fact. I'm going out to run. So through years of doing that, this is why I preach running every day, regardless of how many miles it is. It doesn't matter if it's 1 mile every single day for a year, if it's 5 miles every day for a single year, if it fluctuates, but at least you run a mile every day for a year. If you're someone who struggles with motivation, if you're someone who struggles with feeling like you just don't have that desire like you once had, That's normal. That is a normal ebb and flow of the process of doing anything, not even just running, but anything. And you have to practice doing things regardless of how you feel. So in those bigger races, like the Arrowhead 135, which was the hardest race, hardest experience I've ever been through physically from a running perspective. When I was out there and I was laying in the snow on the trail trying to catch a 2-minute nap, calling my girlfriend, wanting to quit, all I could do in that moment was focus on the physical, focus on putting one foot in front of the other, because that's all I had control over. I didn't have control over how I felt. I didn't have control over how tired I was. Although all of those things get taken out of my control, because hard things are gonna be hard. There's no way around that. Now, some people, I don't totally relate to this, but some people will say that's where your core values come in. That's where your why, your deeper why for why you're doing it. To a certain extent, I agree. But your why can change. It can fluctuate from experience to experience. Like, we did 3 years back to back to back of these Love Like Lori charity runs, where we raised money for our nonprofit, Love Like Lori, for pancreatic cancer. And the why for those runs was much different than the why for Arrowhead. The why around that was the nonprofit Love Like Lori, Lori being my friend whose mom passed away back in 2020 from pancreatic cancer. The why around that race was focused primarily on, yes, raising money, but what I connected to was this shared suffering aspect, where I knew my friend Blake was going through a hard time, and through me going through this hard time physically, that was coming together with his difficult time, where we created this positive outcome. We could share in that suffering together. Different sufferings, no question, but suffering nonetheless. And it was through that suffering that we grew in our relationship. We grew an understanding of the suffering that we were going through. And so that was my why for that. Now, Arrowhead was different. My why for that was, I wanted to know if I was actually who I said I was, or actually who I say I am, or actually who I believe I am to be, compared to who I actually am. Because you can believe a lot about yourself, you can think a lot of things about yourself, but at the end of the day, all that matters when it comes to, going out and like saying, oh, I can run Arrowhead, oh, I can win Arrowhead. All that matters is if you actually do it or not. When it's most difficult, when all the excuses build up, are you the type of person that continues on, or are you the type of person that quits? And I'll be completely honest, while I was out there, even though I was still out there doing it, I questioned everything about myself. I started to feel like a fraud. I started to feel like, wow, I really am not the guy that I think I am. I'm so much weaker than I believe I am if I'm having all of these thoughts, if I'm having all of these doubts. And I felt so incredibly weak mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, in so many moments throughout Arrowhead. But on the other side of things, because I focused on one thing specifically, of just putting one foot in front of the other, I came out the other side much stronger, knowing that I could get that weak and still move through it. And so the motivation, how do I stay motivated? It's much more of like a physical, how can I have a one-stop shop solution for all of the excuses that come in? And for Arrowhead, that's just keep going. For Wausau last year, last person standing, that was just don't quit. Because I knew that if I focused on one thing, of not quitting or just keep going, then I could basically answer all the problems that I had. And when you do that, you start to build resilience, and in the back of your mind, in your DNA, now I don't know if that's like a physical transformation, it might be, low on fuel. You start to remember those things. And so when you're in that moment again in the future, your body and your mind reminds yourself that you've been here before and that you've overcome this before and that you can do it again. And so it's like I say, the proof is in the pudding, the evidence is in the actions. When you put yourself in those situations and you prove to yourself that you are indeed who you say you are, regardless of how you feel, you start to that ingrains in you that you are the type of person that overcomes challenges. So that's what I gotta say about that. Best way to train for a last man standing or a last person standing, that's the next question. My honest recommendation is Calendar Club. For me, that's where I found success. But in all reality, what is going to work best for you is you going out, trying a last person standing, seeing if you're successful. More than likely, because of the race dynamic, only one person is successful out of all the people that show up. So the odds are incredibly against you. Inevitably, you'll fail at least once if you're doing multiple, and you learn why you failed. It's going to be a very hard conversation to have with yourself, because in the moment, you're going to quit because your knee or your hip or something mentally, you just couldn't get over a barrier, and it's all gonna feel like the perfect excuse to quit. But a few days later, or maybe even hours after you finally call it quits, you're gonna feel probably some regret. You're gonna feel like, man, I could have gone way farther than I actually did. And it's in that moment of honesty and clarity that you gotta write it down, that you gotta be clear on, okay, I failed because my mental toughness wasn't there. And if that's the answer to your question, then you gotta go back and look at your training and see where you failed for the mental side of things, how many days you took off because you just didn't have the energy or you didn't have the time, or you made some sort of excuse not to show up and do the work. If your body gave out, which happens, a lot of times it's your mind, but if your body gives out, well, then you gotta run more. You gotta run more miles during the week. You gotta put on more longer runs on the weekend. Maybe you do a 30-mile day, or you go out and you run for 10 hours, and you might make it 30 miles, you might make it 50 miles, you might make it 10 miles, but you gotta get in the mindset of understanding in that moment of complete honesty, when you really know, because only you know at the end of the day why you failed, being able to write that down and then work on it for the next time. No failure is a failure if you learn and improve upon that for the next time you're out there. Someone asked me, said, I'm new to running. How do you stay entertained? They're bored out there. I've gotten in a bad habit of being on my phone. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm really big into the moral discussions, moral arguments. It's one of the ways in which I found my faith again. I really found it for the first time was through Christian apologetics, and essentially what that is using logic and reason to argue the existence of God. And so some of those discussions will be in science, in biology, there's never been an instance where life has come from non-life. So you talk about the universe. How did the universe get started? Well, in the world, in the observable world, life always comes from life. So the world, this life, the universe, this life had to have come from some life based on logic and reasoning and science. And then you go, okay, I believe in objective morality. Other people believe that morality is subjective. But if you're going to say morality is subjective, then you can't objectively say that like slavery is wrong or that the Holocaust was wrong. I believe those things are objectively wrong. And in order to do that, there's got to be a moral lawgiver that stands outside of people, outside of culture, outside of society. And science doesn't prove morals. It proves a process of repeatability, but it doesn't prove or provide any insight into morals. And so I listen to atheists debate Christians, Christians debate agnostics, or Catholics debating Protestants. I have found myself eating those up. I love listening to those conversations. I love listening to people far more intelligent than me having those conversations. I listen to Cam Hanes, Keep Hammering Collective, and hearing these magnificent stories of endurance and motivation and perseverance from other ultra athletes or other people that might not be like runners specifically, but they're bow hunters, or Truett Haynes doing the world record 10,001 pull-ups in 24 hours. So I'm inspired by other people going out and pursuing insane feats, and I like to listen to them on my runs. So there's that side of things. Someone asked me my most memorable God moment during running. Okay, there's a few. I can think of a few that like brought me closer to God. I was listening to a Keep Hammering Collective with Sally McRae, the Yellow Runner. This was like 2 Octobers ago. And she was talking about how when she's in the hardest moments of her ultras, she reminds herself that she's made in the image of God, the image of the creator of the universe. And because of that, we all are. She has that strength in her. And so she goes to that well. And not even like 10 minutes later, this is at a time where I was contemplating going back to church. I was contemplating just trying to understand where I sat with God. I ran into my friend Vince Lapusa, Fresh Steeps Vince, and he was also going through some of those questions, and he was at the beach at Lake Nokomis reading his Bible. And the verse that he was reading was something along the lines of, "You do not know God because you are not of God." And it was something along those lines, where it was a call to, if you don't know the answers about God, if you don't know, then you need to seek it out. And it was in that moment I was like, oh my gosh, God is speaking to me in this moment, because I'm questioning these things. I'm trying to figure out how to learn more or what I should do. And I listened to that podcast. 10 minutes later, I see Vince, and that verse was just like speaking to exactly what I was going through. And then like a year later, this is like 6 months ago, I was out on another run and I was feeling distant from God. I was like, man, like I don't feel like I understand logically. This is after going to men's groups and reading and listening more. I didn't feel any transformation happening. And I was talking to God. I was like, I don't feel like I understand it in my head, but my heart still feels very distant. And I came across an open Bible on the side of the train tracks, and the page was open. Before I even knew, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to speak to me. I just know it. And it was a verse, I think from Leviticus, that said, "Seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart." And I just broke down. Tears started rolling down my face, and it made me feel that through my calling out to God, he was showing me this sign that if I wanted to feel this heart transformation, then I had to stop living 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Stop doing the things that I know that through the Bible are calling me to turn away from, sins to turn away from. Whether that's fornication outside of marriage or self-pleasure through pornography. Like things that I had known from my teenage years that were just normal to me, that God calls us to be more. And I've felt the presence of God in reflection when I look back on like some of these longer runs that I've done before I really put faith in God and faith in Jesus Christ. Go ahead. And the Love Like Glory runs were perfect examples of that. Just, I felt the blanket of love, even though I didn't know how to describe it at that time. And even through like Arrowhead, even through the toughest moments of that. And at this time, I had really connected with my faith and was reading the Word, and even through that suffering, I never felt alone in it. And it wasn't like any big moment. I just never felt alone. And that was when you're suffering in such a big way and you're out alone in the woods, as I was, to in that moment not feel alone, feel God's presence, just made me feel safe and at peace, and like I can get through this, and I will get through this, and this isn't the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and there's someone who loves me that's looking out for me. Yeah. All right. This is the last one. Do you get nervous before a long event race such as last person standing? No. I don't get nervous before those much at all. I get more nervous before the Beer Mile series, before those races, because they're quick and the anticipation leading up to it, and the winner is determined by speed, where it's just bang, bang, bang. Before the last person standing, I know that this race is going to be days long. And so I don't get nervous for it because I know it's going to take a long period of time. So for the longer races, because I have that perspective of like, I won't know the answer to if I'm the last person standing for another at least 34 hours. And so I don't find myself feeling pressure or feeling that anticipation or feeling the rush of things much at all. But for quicker races, like I did a 50K 2 Octobers ago, Wild Duluth 50K. I was a little bit more nervous before that because I knew it was more of a speed race. So whenever there's urgency involved, then I become not nervous, but like excited. The nerves are there, the pregame jitters. Anytime I know it's more of an endurance or more of like a outlast or perseverance type of thing, there's not much urgency in those races, so there's not as many nerves or excitement that surround it, if that makes sense. So those are the questions that I got from the Q&A. If there's any other questions that you want to know the answer to, I'd be happy to do more of these for my YouTube audience. So leave a comment below if there's a question you have, and in my next video, I will be sure to, my next Q&A video, I'll be sure to answer it. But I got last person standing the first week of May. June is this Beat My Beer Mile series that I'm putting together. And then July is the Duluth run, and then the Ode to Laz last person standing silver ticket race for 2026 into the Backyard Ultra World Championship team. So I haven't signed up for that yet. Got to put that on the calendar. Other than that, though, that is today's video.